don't think that these are, again, I'm not the authority on the analytic philosophy of language, but I don't think that there is that much out there on the importance of distinctions between slavery and enslavement, or a Jew and Jewish person, and what these things connote as we feel and talk. But also speaking about textual traditions, many minutes ago, Lou, you mentioned something about, producing or creating beauty being very important in the African and Africana traditions. And I think, and I might be mistaken, you tied it to perhaps an optimism, or the thought that we had that people of African descent had to move on. And you've also written that you think of philosophy as not only reflective, critical thinking, but also aesthetic expression. And this was something that really jumped out at me, because when I think of, again, the analytic tradition, which I'm much more familiar with, there are a few really great stylists like Quine or Russell or Ayer or people like that. But I don't at all I didn't at all before reading this, think of philosophy as a substantially aesthetic endeavor. But then I think about people like Langston Hughes, or maybe one might consider jazz musicians as part of Africana philosophy. And then I would also think of Africana philosophy as having a serious oral tradition in a way that maybe analytic philosophy doesn't. Perhaps this was song or verse, the way that maybe like the Iliad or something was transmitted for a long period of time. So I'm wondering, both of you, how aesthetics play a role in Africana philosophy in a way that most people might not be familiar with in philosophy.
Chike, taking a run with it.
Yeah, I think that when you remember that through either not being literate, in conditions where that's not a social problem because you live in a generally non-literate culture, or being non-literate in a problem where that in a situation where that is a social problem. For example, you are barred from literacy because of being enslaved, right? That means that the textual tradition, is in that sense narrowed, right? And it's important for us to be able to examine a variety of ways in which African peoples have expressed themselves, right, when thinking about how they have expressed themselves philosophically, right, how they've communicated, right, they're thinking about fundamental questions, and so artistic expression thereby becomes very important source. You mentioned jazz musicians, and I wanted to reflect on that for just a bit, because I know that for myself, there's a sense in which I know I tend to focus as let's say a historian of Africana philosophy. I tend to focus on that which can be in some important sense made textual. And so that would even include something that is in the form of a song, but then we can write down the lyrics, right? And we can talk about the discursive work being done, right, in those words, right? And so there becomes perhaps a challenge to me, right, when we then think about those who haven't used words like your Miles Davis, like your, you know what? I'm gonna stick with Miles for a second, right? Because I was even gonna throw Coltrane in there, right? But now I'm even grabbing onto the words "A Love Supreme" being repeated in the song, right? So let me put it, because Miles doesn't put too much words in there at all, right? So what does it mean, sort of to approach him as a philosopher, right? I think it's a fascinating question, right? And one of the, I would even say, fun things about Africana philosophy, right, is the way that it pushes us to ask these questions about where we find philosophy, right? And the thing that I would say is that regardless of, let's say you wanted to take a certain kind of hardline stance and say, well, no, a trumpet, you can do all kinds of interesting things with a trumpet, but you can't do philosophy with a trumpet, right? Because you need words to do philosophy, right? Let's say you take that kind of hard stance. One of the things that you are going to need to do if you really want to enter the conversation of Africana philosophy, right, is you need to, for example, address, a very important person called Cornel West, right? And Cornel West himself, in his in much of what he has had to say about the African American tradition, right, has treated the expressiveness of jazz, right, as sometimes more articulate in its own ways, right, than many of the other sources, right, and so you're at least then drawn into a debate, right, about why he's wrong about that, if you think he's wrong about that, right? And so there's a sense in which even that which seems like it might get excluded on the grounds of like there's not even any words, right? And I would sort of agree for myself that it becomes hard for me to think about what I'm going to do, given my general attraction to working with what can be made textual, right? But even there, the significance of something like jazz to the tradition, right? I used Cornel West as one example. I think Ralph Ellison would be another example. There are important figures who have demanded that we pay attention to what can be done with jazz, right? And so you're sort of forced to come to it anyway. Is my first thought.
Yeah, let me just bring two figures together here. Right. One is Plato, one is Ellison. So
yeah,
if you go to Plato's Republic, why is there so much time spent in the designing of the curriculum for this musical city to music and poetry?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Now, Plato is convinced that there's something about harmonic sounds,
yes,
that affect the soul.
Yeah.
So part of what he's concerned about in designing a curriculum is, in a very real sense, that curriculum is designed to take the three parts of the soul and attune them in a certain proper ordering. There's got to be a proper ordering of the relationship of the rational, the passionate, and if you will, the vegetative. So those three things have to be ordered in a particular way, the same way the city has to be ordered in terms of the classes, right? And there's something that Plato is trying to get at about the way in which harmonic sounds can affect the ordering for good or for bad. And he's really concerned about that. Ellison, and it's capsulated for me in a particular expression that he uses in one of his essays, where he talks about the way in which music can do the work of emotional structure. And so one of the ways he's trying to get it is a way in which time signatures and harmonic structure have emotional consequences for the ordering of the emotions. So if you've got someone who understands that and has a certain kind of sense of attunement to particular signatures, time signatures, harmonic compositions, having effect upon the emotions, structuring the emotions in the moment, you can begin to then understand, well, why are there things like soundtracks that have particular takes for particular moments in history as movements are going on? And you can talk about the soundtracks of the Civil Rights Movement, the soundtracks of the Black Lives Matter movement. Why? Well, if these thinkers are correct, it is because there is an intimate relation to be had between harmonic soundings and emotional structure. There's a possibility of an ordering, which ordering can have, if you will, impetus for and toward. We certainly see this in church, but we see it in dance halls. Or we just sit around ourselves and something comes on and we find ourselves patting our feet, moving. We begin to bodily respond to what the music, the ordering of the chords, the tempo pace of the music and stuff. Well, Plato was exploring this, but Ellison explored it. He said that's part of what's happening in jazz and other forms of music. And Ellison is very discriminating about what some of that should be as opposed to what some should not be. Because of this emotional structuring that is going on through these musics. And jazz is exemplary of this because for him it is also exemplary at its best of what he calls democratic collaboration. That is, jazz artists improvise. So what you got is each is creatively free to engage in what is called improvisation. However, that improvisation is within the structured context of a particular number. It may be a church song, it may be whatever, but the jazzing of that is to take that structured whole, stay within the structuring in one sense while improvising in and around it, such that in some ways it is still recognizable even when there's all this innovation going on. Because there are some people who are charged with keeping the structure going. It may be the drummer, it may be the bassist, it may be the percussionist. They've got certain structuring going that they are maintaining while other people are innovating all around it, but never until you get to some moment. And Coltrane says, well, let's just let go of all of that and just freely improvise. And that's what I say. Well, Coltrane, if I can't pat my foot to it, you done lost me. But I mean, I think there's so much to the music stuff.
Yeah, there is.
The way it works into things like civil rights movement, Black Lives, you name it, that there's a deep something going on. And again, it's because I said there were people, even under some of the worst conditions, right? We know there were people, we've had the reports of people on slave ships who jumped overboard and committed suicide. Overwhelmingly, the slaves didn't do that. Overwhelmingly, they didn't do that. And the way under some of the worst society, even in the civil rights movement, when people were in jail, what did they do? They sang. They sang, right? So that music has become this means by which to keep the soul intact, by which nurturing one could still cultivate aspirations for a future. Even if you accept it, you would not live to see it, but you were damn well determined to pass on that aspiration to others who would live it on your behalf. That's one of the mind-blowing things of to be found within these traditions of thought. Mm-hmm. This keeping it alive, the aspiration for freedom. Freedom not to go and destroy and kill, not a freedom without white people, a freedom to be shared with whomever, everybody. And giving up music and dance or whatever, and never saying, don't touch this, don't pat your foot to my music. It was, no, Robinson, come on, get up and come dance with me, Robinson. Well, I don't know how to, well, come on, baby, I'll teach you. Got to learn how to move. Am I right, Chike?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I could use the help.
And we all had to learn, Robinson. That's, Don't let nobody tell you that we all got it naturally.
Well, this discussion, though, it underscores for me that philosophy is just a word, and it's an important word, but it's still a word that exists to serve us. And if you define it as being purely concerned with linguistic acts, that could really be limiting and unproductive if non-linguistic enterprises contribute to the sorts of things that we want philosophy to do for us. So give us a sophisticated understanding of ourselves and the words in the world, for instance. And I mean, as with the covering term Africana philosophy, there are benefits and drawbacks to extending it so that it encompasses other activities beyond producing texts. But in this case, it seems like extending the definition of philosophy is conducive to exploring these intimate relationships, to use your phrase, Lou, between different aspects of the African diaspora and its attendant traditions.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I try to do is to pry us away, in some respects, from the term philosophy as a noun, in one sense, to a focus upon an activity. Philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my argument is that anthropologically speaking, that is, if we step back and take a species level view, there's no way our species can survive and persist without engaging in certain kinds of activities that professional academic philosophy has tried to capture and monopolize under its own auspices. But if you start to say, well, philosophy is concerned with the perennial questions of life, my response is, show me any population of human beings who persisted across several generations who have not wrestled with fundamental questions about the meaning of life.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And they did not go to any graduate school of philosophy to get the preparations for doing so. They did not wait for anyone to write a text that they had to read or a journal article in order for them to have to take up those questions. Should I jump off the side of this boat and end my life? Or should I continue into what I know not what the hell is going to come next? What should I do? If I'm an enslaved woman, I'm raped by a white master or his son or somebody working in the plantation, and I know in a short time that I'm pregnant, what do I do? Do I abort this pregnancy? Or do I carry this child to term, bring it into this world? If I'm raped by the master of the house who has a wife and children, when I'm working in this house, when his wife begins to see that my stomach is growing, it's not going to take her much to figure out that I'm pregnant. And when that baby is born, if she sees this baby, and I've got the darkest of skin, and this child is mocha, she's going to know something is up. Do I bring a child into this circumstance? Or should I abort it? My guess is, overwhelmingly, the white women in that situation carried those children to term, brought them into the world, knowing that they had no control over the future lives of that child and could not prevent that child from being taken from them and sold into enslavement. And yet they brought them in, loved the hell out of them as best they could. Why? Why? Why bring a child into that kind of world? and keep telling children, someday we shall be free, singing about it, praying about it. I mean, it to me is just utterly extraordinary. Utterly extraordinary that these people did this. They went to no graduate school. They read no text in existentialism. They read no text in metaphysics. Still, they had deep senses about life, living, futurity, patience, determination, generosity. I mean, a Black enslaved woman making milk in her breast because she has a child, taking out her breast and allowing the baby of a slave owner to suckle from her breast to get nourishment and growth. Generosity, the word just doesn't seem to me to be anywhere near adequate to capture what this woman is doing. Why? That's to me the wrestling with the meaningfulness of life and what they would have their lives be about, to me, could not happen without thoughtfulness. You have to think about this. Will I give my breast milk to the baby of a slaveholder? Yep, come here, baby. This baby needs some food. Mama can't make more. I'll feed this baby. I'm not going to let this baby die of hunger or malnourished. Takes out her breast, lets this baby suckle at her breast. Why? Why? And there's no way you're going to convince me she did not think about what she was doing and why she was doing it. In other words, she philosophized. Wrestled with some profound ethical questions in a moment of deep existential challenge.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't wait for Socrates. Did not wait for Sartre.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the story we've been trying to bring to the fore for considerations by others.
Mm-hmm. Chike, do you have any final thoughts?
Well,
no, he's still living. There won't be any final thoughts from Chike until he takes his last breath.